You're listening to the Ethos Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to this podcast where today I'm joined by Paul Sims, founder of Impatient Health, and by Brenda Rafferty, who is head of code governance at Boehringer Ingelheim. And today we're going to be discussing the medical compliance, marketing, commercial relationship and how well that works or doesn't work. Maybe I'll start with you, Paul, and you've not worked within a pharmaceutical company, but I'm sure you've seen some of those discussions, shall we say, going on between medical and commercial and compliance teams in development of materials and things. What's your reflections on this relationship?
That it's all screwed up at the moment. We need it to be far better. And I find that the companies that we consider to have figured this out have basically got the teams working more closely together, but the roles very clear and apparent. So from my point of view, I think if we could see a bit more organizational restructuring and some mindset evolution such that people realize that they're actually ultimately aiming for the same sort of thing at the end of the day, then I think that within that you can actually have very distinct roles. And it seems to me that the companies that are actually forging ahead and making a strong headway in this area are the ones that have been able to evolve in that area and not quite simply got them versus us relationships all over the organization. Of course, very easy to say, very hard to do, especially when there's things like data involved and that sort of sense of protectionism that comes, that people feel that they've got different rules that they have to apply, and how could they possibly do that across, all of these sort of artificial boundaries that we've created. But I do believe that mindset and increasingly technology will enable us to be a bit more advanced in this area.
A bit more advanced, and you're talking there about single goals. I reflect that for a few years ago, somebody joined a team I was working in from a management consultancy, and they joined in the commercial team, and we were reflecting probably unusually about how well the team was working. And this person said, well, I just see you as two tribes. You've got different rules and you meet now and again, but you're operating to different goals. Brenda, Paul said it's all screwed up.
Yes.
What's your reflection on that? Have you seen bad teams and good teams? What do you think is? What's your reflection on what Paul said?
Well, it's an interesting viewpoint. I would say that it's true in some pharma companies. I do think the teams have evolved, certainly in the company that I'm at now, Boehringer. And my role is probably not in every company. So my role is like head of co-governance, and I sit within the business. So within Med Affairs, within medicine, and my role is really to be that strategic point to implement the PMCPA, the code, the guidance documents, look at cases, and then lead a team of reviewers and signatories. So the way I've seen it work poorly in the past is that, it's that, there's different teams and things go last minute to the signatory in electronic approval system, whether it's Viva or another one. And then the signatory's never seen it before. I can remember actually in one of my first jobs, the medical director said, if you send me a job bag and you haven't discussed it with me first, I'll automatically reject it. So for me at the time, it's like, whoa, it's like an interesting viewpoint. But I can tell you what we do. Do you
think that's a good? I'm just to interrupt on that one, though. I sometimes think it needs people to do things like that before anything's done.
Yes.
If you're getting rejected on a job bag and then you have to spend, that makes people listen. Do you think that was the right approach, or just on that particular point, or not?
I mean, I could understand the person's point of view of why they had done that, but there's probably a different way that they could have gone about it, really. I think that can lead to very conflicting and stressful situations.
Yeah.
When people are in a stress mindset, they can make bad decisions. We know there's the concept of like ethical fading.
Yeah.
So if people are trying to make decisions in a very short time frame, that they're not going to make the best decision. But whenever I've seen it work really well is that you have the medical reviewers and the signatories embedded into the team, and it is a team, and so they understand the strategic direction that therapy area is taking from the beginning of the year. Whenever they're doing their planning, they're actually part of that conversation, and that's where they can add valuable input. Like, for example, we have a senior medical advisor who was a GP and was still continuing to be a GP half a day a week. And she was able to say, you're working on this material, but it's actually not valuable to GPs. Yeah. You think it's valuable, but it's not actually. So that's where we're adding value at that point. And then from that, then we have as well prioritization meetings where each team meets weekly, and it's cross-functional, and everybody who's got a job bag coming in has to attend the meeting. Yeah. And then from that, then that's down to like working with all the different cross-functional teams.
So it's discussion sort of all the way through the
100%
the process, and particularly, and I know you've mentioned this previously, Paul, the importance of speaking about things at concept stage and first ideas. Do you worry that might, from Paul, I mean, I think you mentioned in other conversations we've had that might restrict, people might worry that restricts thinking early on. What do you think that's true, or?
There is a worry, of course, that sort of almost having the rules applied at the idea stage can kill what could end up being a good idea. And I certainly believe in the power of sort of being able to dream a little bit, even before you wake up and realize you can't fly, or whatever it is that you were dreaming of. And there does have to be a little bit of leeway, I guess, in that conceptual stage. But at the same time, I would argue that knowing the rules is an important thing for anyone, any communicator of any type, to do. And the more that you can speak that same language, the more that you can understand that you have a shared vision at the end of the day, the more that you can understand that quite simply the signatory is taking on a lot of accountability, and therefore they're always going to care about, what gets out of the room. The more that you can do that, the better and more productive and the more creative that conversation can ultimately be, because you'll realize that there is not just threat but opportunity in the room.
Yeah. I always reflect that when I'm a signatory, when I'm doing signatory work, if I know the people I'm working with are looking for my back, if you like, and thinking about the things I'm thinking about and debating with me, and if I push back, they've got a good argument, then I'm on their side because they're thinking about the things I'm thinking about and they know their stuff. But I've been in teams as well where I haven't had that empathy, and that makes me nervous and less likely to be creative and more cautious, because I think that sometimes people are trying to pull a fast one. Frankly, I know some companies I work with where commercial people are all over the code, and I know there's companies where they're not. Or at least other teams where they're not. And it's probably unfair to characterise companies. It's probably within teams, within companies and individuals. But some people are all for it and some aren't. How do we encourage, I presume you think it's a good idea that, Brenda, that commercial people know their stuff and can argue. How do you encourage that, do you think?
I suppose... just going back a step, I do think that medical can be creative as well, and they add such value to the process. And it's not just the privilege of people in marketing that can add that value. So, in the same regard, medical colleagues, be they medical signatories, medical advisors, AQP signatories, their job is at the beginning, like to help. Really shape the projects, and that's where we have like structured things where we do concept documents or scoping documents. So they get involved at the beginning. They don't have to handhold the whole way through. They step away and continue their own projects, let the teams develop the project, discuss what they think the risks are, because really what it comes down to is every company has its own company culture. And it comes down to where we would see the risks could be, can you mitigate them, and what are the benefits, the commercial benefits to the business. At the end of the day, the most important thing, and I think should be in any company, is that patient safety should never be in question. So we have that as our sort of true north. Similarly, we would try to avoid having clause 2 territory, like the big things bringing the industry into disrepute. And I would say certainly within what we find now in our company, we've come a long way over the last few years. I can tell you some of the support mechanisms we've put into place. But actually marketing are our best job bag creators, most compliant, get it because they're part of the team.
Yeah.
They really, really want the signatory and the conversation earlier. It's actually people in the sort of cross-functional team, whether they be in market access or partnerships teams, who don't actually do this type of work all the time. So they really want to be guided by the signatory team or they'll reach out to my compliance and integrity colleagues as well.
Yeah.
So it really is a cross-functional thing, and to be challenged. But also, I think the key thing is like we try to have an open mindset. That's our rather than closed.
Yeah.
And also trying to be really curious about what are you trying to do, why are you trying to do it, and then trying to find solutions if it's not really apparent. That the path that they've chosen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you raised a good point as well about the fact that I appreciate marketers who are looking out for my back, but I think they appreciate it when I'm suggesting ideas that might improve commercial impact and such. We've done survey work within companies that shows that if you give people the statement to score, medical are completely aware of the commercial priorities. Most people score that statement across teams 5 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm never quite so sure whether that surprises me more or the fact that when I tell people that, they go, yeah, well, I think that's everybody should know what the commercial priorities are and where the company's going and the focus of it, because everybody should be on board with it, But similarly, everybody should know about the ethical and compliance challenges. And it seems to me, again, it's that dichotomy between medical and compliance and commercial functions that can sometimes develop. And it's patchy. My issue sometimes is, though, we leave that relationship to chance. You've got a brand team, whether it works well or not, well, we just throw people into the room, and whether they get on well or not, it's chance. It's far too important for the business to leave to chance. How do you think we create that atmosphere? You've talked about how do you physically make that happen? Any reflections on that?
I think it also depends on the size of the company. If you're in a smaller company, in some regards, it might be harder because people have got lots of hats on.
Yeah.
But I can tell you my experience of what we currently do. So we have got forums whereby, I co-chair with my compliance colleague, a compliance review forum, and there's generally over 100, 120 people attend that monthly. So that's like bringing all the updates, what learnings we've had. We could have had a cookies and been found in breach or not in breach. So what do we learn from that process? And I think it's having that mindset of like always trying to learn. We are not going to get things right all the time. We can try and mitigate risk. Things like that. We have a signatory exchange. When the signatories meet and discuss things like how have you done this in your team? We've got this project, so there's that like cross-functional. So we try to prevent silos.
Yeah. So creating those forums for discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we use MS Teams as a platform. So that's a communication and method as well. So I think the key thing for me is communicate. Like, and you have to keep repeating. You think, oh, everybody knows we've got a SharePoint site, like a website with all our governance documents on it, how to do a job bag on this type of project, how to approve a sponsorship. And the people will go, well, what's ACE? And you're like, we have to keep repeating, because especially in larger pharma companies, there's a lot of staff come in and out, or they change roles. So we're trying to always upskill and keep on top of that, we're doing our best around that. And we're really now, AI is a major focus and certainly in our company. But how can we leverage AI to support the teams so I think the key word is empowered, and that's what one of my key strategic goals is: empower people to make the decisions themselves at the problem, not have them having to escalate higher up to go and ask a leader to come back down again, because you lose so much time. And as we know, then if you lose time, then you've lost traction, and there's hard deadlines on some projects. So we have a lot of forums, we have communication channels, and then we've also set up, so the key thing for us is, we've got new medical reviewers, MSLs, and aspiring signatories. So in 2024, we set up what's called a Signatory Academy. We used an external provider for some of the training, and now it's got 5 pillars for the medical reviewers, which is the same, and then 2 more for aspiring signatories. So we are supporting them by the end of that year journey as an aspiring signatory, that they feel confident and competent to be a signatory for Boehringer. And then that continues afterwards for a minimum of 6 months, where they're mentored by a senior signatory, because it's about interpretation. We, interestingly, just changing tack slightly, we had a talk recently from a female first fighter pilot. And she said, I didn't learn to fly a fighter jet on my first go. You need experience. I started on a plane that goes X miles per hour, and I build myself up. So you can't assume that people, just because they've passed their signatory exam, know everything. They maybe know the theory, but if they've never done something practically, the first time can be a bit challenging. Yeah. So we try to provide support around that area as well. Mm-hmm. So that's what we do.
Yep. Yeah. And Paul, what's your reflection? How would you, if you were pharma provocateuring and saying this team is rubbish, how would you know, would you think, and what would you do if you had to come in?
Well, I was very pleased to hear about how technology is being used as an enabler to empower, I think was the word that you used, and how indeed that will allow people at a slightly more junior level to feel more confident, and of course be more compliant, quite simply, in their work. But it's interesting to me that also I find myself asking the question, do we want to remove all the friction in the process? If you could touch a button and everything that you dreamt of or put down on a page was instantly going to be compliant, is that actually what we want? You've just talked about how experience is so important. And what I sometimes wonder is whether AI as a technology is actually going to erode trust at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think of that is because we've just recently had Valentine's Day. Now, if you'd brought your partner a meal on Valentine's Day that required sticking it into a microwave for 2 minutes and then serving it, you probably would get chucked out of the house.
What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that? Yeah. If you were to apply for a job and your CV was obviously written by AI, is the recruiter really going to trust you, even though it might look perfect? Yeah. There are certain areas of communication and indeed just relationship building where we want there to be a certain degree of friction. And trust is something that we build as humans, where we see that there's been some kind of investment, some kind of pain or at least effort involved in actually getting there. And I think that the process of the back and forth of getting something compliant and getting something good, equally the back and forth of honing the message and actually seeing what the best thing to simply say in the first place is, and there being some kind of evidence of that. You know, if I just said to you that every communication here was written by AI, then you're probably going to say, well, is it really worth my time reading it?
Yeah.
And so I like the idea of distinguishing between good friction and bad friction.
Yeah.
And when you say empowerment, what I want is for a lot of the operational malaise to be eradicated. But what I don't want is for some of that creativity and some of that genuine thought about what we're actually trying to do with the communication, the message and the impact we're trying to have. That still has to remain resolutely human.
Yeah.
And I think that by separating out those two, we will indeed be able to both get the efficiencies that we're looking for and not lose the trust that is actually golden, and I fear we may lose if we're not careful.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, that friction. I think of the best team I ever worked in, the best brand team I ever worked in, many years ago now. And I don't think there's been progressive improvement in brand team relationships, by the way. I mean, over the years, it's been up and down. I'm not sure we're any better than we were 20, 30 years ago. But we had a team that was very tight between medical and commercial. Everybody knew the goals. And we had stand-up rows about certain things. But the background relationship between the people in the team was very strong. So we could have those debates and disagreements and then have a laugh. And I do have a worry, you know, particularly after the pandemic and so many more meetings where people are actually never meeting, never having those little conversations, that actually the team ethos isn't as strong as it could be, or there's a danger that it erodes through the tech that we're using, and we're not meeting each other as people as much. It's much more difficult to fall out with somebody you've met face to face, you know, than it is somebody you've just seen on a call or.
So we're not going to be fighting after.
We're not going to be fighting.
That's good to know.
Well, not looking at the size of you. Neither of you. So I reflect that I think good friction is good. It's about but a solid relationship at the base of it, and I'm not sure whether we've necessarily improved that. I do wonder whether there's an opportunity with AI, particularly coming into the medical and legal review process, that's a point at which teams should perhaps stop and think about how they're interacting. You know, we're developing a workshop along those lines, because I think companies are just going to tip AI into good teams and bad teams, and it will, you know, without the teams even thinking, what's the ultimate goal of all this? Why are we introducing AI? Are we just trying to shift more stuff, or are we trying to make better quality materials and such? What's your reflections on that? Because all companies are going to be introducing AI into MLR at some point.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think if you think AI is going to solve all your problems, I don't think that's like probably a great viewpoint to have. I think if you think about it as a companion, it's an extra member of the team.
Yeah.
It's not, and what it will mean, AI and MLR is that we would hope that whenever we're working with agencies, that the quality of the materials is coming through is of a higher standard. So that, you know, the basic things, we wanted to do the basic things of like, you know, checking references and can that claim be substantiated, so that the teams can get on with making the bigger decisions of like, is this the right thing to do? Will it add value to the NHS? Will it add value to patients? So I welcome it as a concept. I mean, I always reflect whenever I had my first job as a hospital pharmacist nearly 30 years ago, and I got an email address, and I was like, I wonder what this is for. But everybody's talking about email, so I should get one. Yeah. And, you know, now if you said that, I'd say that to people and they're like, that's a bit weird, you know. But I think that's what AI is going to be in 5 or 10 years' time. It'll just be par for the course. And it's changing so dramatically. I would really like to see, I mean, the PMCPA has produced some guidance around AI. I know we've spoken about this, to say that you should have governance in place, but it's what does that look like whenever it comes to, you know, your promotional and non-promotional materials? What should we have in our AI sort of code governance to ensure that we've done the right thing? So that's one of my projects now coming up for 2026.
Well,
Going back just to that thing about the teams, I mean, I would say that, yes, there are good and bad teams, but I would actually like to push back in the fact that I think things have come a long way, and this concept of there being, individuals and things, people have moved, we've shifted the needle on that. Yes, there are situations where there's conflict, and I'm very keen on healthy conflict, because that's where you can figure out, have you done the right thing? Like, have we done enough here? Should we let that project go? As long as and it's based on trust, as you've mentioned there, Nick, like it's really key. You do need to know if your team's constantly in that storming phase, like it's difficult, it's pressure, it's stress. You want to get into that, performing piece. So, I mean, obviously there's research around that about how do virtuals or hybrid teams work well together. I think it was a Harvard University thing that I'd been on, and one of the lecturers had said, like, it's as simple as going for a cup of coffee with a colleague or having lunch together and getting to know people on that little bit of a personal level.
I so agree.
It doesn't have to be private,
Yeah.
but it could just be personal, because you understand then people in that level, and then that allows people to be in that sort of MS team space, because you think you can understand people a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah.
And in that regard, just one other thing I was thinking whenever you were talking is I try and have the mindset of around that communication piece. So if it's like emails and you're on the third email sort of forwards and back, it's time to set up an MS Teams call or meet them face to face. Speak.
Yeah.
We need to speak. This, volleyball isn't working. So it's, and you lose so much time, and I know actually there's so much misinterpretation of like things in emails. Whenever it's spoken, you can understand things a little bit better.
Yeah.
So we would encourage like those types of behaviours.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm not quite so convinced of the steady improvement of relationships over the years. I still personally think that it's up and down a bit in my from what I see, but that might be your influence in the team, in the companies that you're in,
Yes.
Brenda, because I know you do a lot of work on getting teams to work together. So,
I suppose it's different because, I suppose the medical signatory role is quite varied.
Yeah.
I'm a medical signatory, as I mentioned, started in community pharmacy and then into hospital pharmacy, did a bit of lecturing as well, doing a master's, and then ended up in pharma. And I was like, why would there be pharmacists and doctors in pharma? That was how little I knew. And actually my role now is very similar to the role I had in the NHS around governance. Our company has set up my role. So, and whenever they set it up, they probably didn't really know exactly where I would add value.
Yeah.
Now, so the medical signatory role is varied even within that title. So we've got medical advisors who are deep into the brand teams, maybe only spend half a day a week sort of on job bags. Then we have contract signatories who spend 90% of their time on materials, working in the brand teams. And then we've got business partners, senior medical signatory business partners who work sort of strategically within the brands. So I think it's different. Like your experience may be different because you're coming from the outside, whereas I'm in. And that's probably the difference that we're in. I'm not saying everything goes like super duper every single time. We are constantly trying to move the needle 1%.
But you're very considered about this. This is why we chose to speak to you about this, which is what and affecting the outcomes of teams. I think what I'm seeing from in certain areas is, or my thought, and where I think you're so strong, if you like, is that it needs action.
Yes.
About team relationships. It can't just be left to chance. Is my thought. Maybe I'll give you the final word to you Paul on this. And then
Well, Nick, you have just told me that you travelled from one side of the country to the other to be here for this podcast. You have brought us here in person. We could have done it over Zoom or Teams or whatever,
Yeah.
but you knew that the quality of the conversation, the ability for us to find where our Venn diagrams overlap and ultimately get to somewhere constructive would be better if we did it in person. So you're right. And I really feel sorry for a younger generation who've basically gone from probably being in Zoom lectures to being in Zoom meetings,
yeah.
and they've basically never left their bedroom in their entire career so far. So we do have to find these ways of artificially at first, of course, creating those connections. But ultimately, I think that where that good working relationship and ultimately the nuance that then leads to trust and confidence at the end of the day, that we
Yeah.
can actually say we're going to achieve an impact with our messaging. We're not just writing because we have to write something and the aim is to be as safe as possible and do nothing. We're actually trying to move healthcare forward.
Yes.
And I believe that's at the core of the motivation of most of us in our industry. Then absolutely we have to be willing to get together, resolve conflicts in person, and get onto the same page. And that's why I said, and you said it was an interesting opinion, but you asked me at the very beginning of this conversation, what's the relationships like between the different teams? And I said it's all screwed up. It's because, but so far I haven't heard a good argument against the idea of trying to be as integrated as possible.
Yeah.
As long as you understand that each person has a defined role to play, and that they have, a different objective, a sub-objective within the overall objective.
But the same overarching goal, and not just some vague goal about we're all here to help patients, but
No.
you can act, and I'm not, but that clearly is there, but can describe the goal for
A
your
clear and
brand
specific
see
vision,
where you
which
where
we
you
are
fit in
terrible
that
at
vision.
doing in our industry. I ask people, what's your vision, what's your aim? And they always say things like, we want to be number one in this disease category, which is the least specific. You can't even measure it, let's be
Yeah.
honest. So to actually have, I think it's the responsibility of our leaders to really paint a much more detailed picture of where we can be and where we should be. And we talked about inspiration in our last conversation, to inspire internally as
Yeah.
to where to get to, I think is absolutely key. We hit ourselves with sticks every day. We're not good enough. We keep screwing it up. But what's the carrot? Where are we trying to get to? What does that beautiful, hallowed ground actually look like in
Yeah.
reality? And of course, we can discuss that better in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure to meet you both in person and have this discussion. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Pleasure.